Here we are again for our third recording on feedback. This time it's about the collective one. So we explored what it means to give feedback, to receive feedback, and now collective. Why collective?
Because of course, when it comes to feedback, it's useful for everyone to keep building it for themselves and to build it in pairs. But actually, if the entire culture of the group of people you are working with, you're part of, is supporting it, it just amplifies the opportunities of feedback and what you reap out of it. So I think that's why. And there's a lot of implications also for not just the feedback practice itself, but for how teams, organizations, networks are working and are healthy or not.
Let's have a look at what are the implications when we talk about feedback and this cultural level within a team or an organization.
There's different levels of how that feedback culture manifests itself. The first level, the most obvious one, is what can be seen or heard. It's what is really visible from that culture of feedback. And so very typically, as we've mentioned in the past, it's the annual appraisal, the ritual of annual appraisal, and all the different mechanisms that are supporting it, like getting some 180-degree interview from colleagues, etc. And it's really, also understanding how in those moments of feedback come the question of whether it is just evaluative or whether there's also some coaching or even supportive feedback, etc. And the frequency at which these moments are built. That's really the most visible one. That's what is almost a given in most organizations. But as we said, it's also part of the problem because it creates these reactions of people about feedback.
It's also what can be felt. How is it within an organization, depending on vision, mission, the whole culture, the different indicators, result areas, whatever. So, what can be felt within an organization?
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting point because there's actually a lot of tools that help for feedback that are there, and some you mentioned, that are not necessarily seen as tools for feedback, but they're actually really, really helpful. For instance, if you use a guiding, indeed, it could be a logical framework, it could be a theory of change. It is guiding you to understand how you're making change and how you're achieving results. And in there is the seed for having feedback loops that help you reflect, how are we achieving this? What is it that we can do better collectively in order to achieve this particular vision? So I think there's that an organization realizes all of these guiding instruments is really helpful, is a good prerequisite for feedback.
What can be sensed? And I think this is really an important one. We all sense it, and it's sometimes it's almost tangible. What about learning and perfection? What's the orientation? How does this feel? Is it really growth mindset, very fixed, or is it openness and we really want to learn together? Is it success, or is it about learning and progress? Is it about helping each other? Or more the measuring? There are a lot of things in here, and I think we all know and experienced and sensed it, how this felt.
Yeah, and there's indeed many aspects to this, which, by the way, I mean, by saying cultural aspects, of course, you wonder, one might wonder, what is the culture? And is it like it can often feel for many people that it's fixed, but it's not. It's a dynamic thing. It keeps on evolving, but it keeps on evolving with all the interactions and the values and principles that put in their interactions. And so we're sort of shaping it in the process. But I think there's a number of elements that can really support a healthy culture of feedback. For instance, having a very formal kind of environment means that it's going to provide more rigidity for feedback and make it also feel a bit more judgmental than supportive or coaching, etc. I think also if you have a very strong hierarchy, it doesn't necessitate encourage feedback, or it may encourage feedback only in one direction as opposed to the other. So that's again something that might be not necessarily supporting feedback. It could also be that and we're going to come back to that point in the management culture. There's really the culture of managing from the front. The manager is the one sort of showing the path and actually leading the path with everyone behind, or showing or leading and empowering from behind, and basically being there together, looking at the vision, but supporting everyone in becoming better leaders at what they're doing. And all these things again are useful stepping stones for feedback. They can be.
And I think another element, an important element, is the listening. I mean, we said it needs two. One is the receiver, one is the giver, and receiving, an important part is listening. How do we listen? What's the quality of listening? And do we listen to counter, to attack, or do we take it in to respond, to understand what's in this listening? And then we might want to refer back to our first recordings where we talked about the triggers, because when I receive and really listen, then I also have to listen not only what I'm hearing, but also what's triggered in me. So listening to myself. So I think the quality of listening is really important here.
Yeah, I agree. Focus is more on empathy, understanding the other perspective, rather than the excellence of my point of view, my smartness, my great thinking, etc. I mean, at the end of the day, yeah, it even boils down to love versus pride. Is it what are you nurturing in your culture? Is it a healthy culture where people feel they can realize themselves, or is it a pride culture where you're really like encouraging, again, excellence?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think there's one that's really important when we talk about collective feedback. It's not only about someone giving me a feedback and I giving someone a feedback. It's always also, or mainly it's about our work together. It's about the team. It's about us. How are we together as a team? How do we work? How is our collaboration? And about the work we are doing together. So on this level, I think collective feedback really can bring a lot on the collaborational level.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think that also that collective lens can also create or pave the way for having a keener eye for diversity, for heterogeneity, for inclusion, which is really, really important. Again, it's not about me, myself, and I having all the answers. It's rather, okay, we actually need all these different competencies and life experiences and insights and ideas and capacities to build something together. And I think, that feedback is going to be probably healthier and easier when you are really valuing this diversity and this inclusion, when you're not talking about just conforming to one particular norm, but accepting that there are plural norms, and that you're also not just looking, for instance, at the function of a person, but at that entire person as a wholesome thing. So
yeah, I mean, let's be frank. I mean, collaboration is not always easy. I mean, you feel stuck, and that can be for different reasons. Something outside is not working, or it's within the group there are some tensions or whatever. And if you have a culture of feedback, it's easier to talk about these moments of tension, or when you're stuck. Hey, let's take a moment. How are we together? I mean, this is also about feedback. And I think that's why collective feedback is so important for a team, because it nurtures a good collaboration in the end.
Yeah. And as you said, I mean, even because in collaboration and because it's tough, there's always some things that happen. It could be interpersonal conflicts or disagreements. It could be something else that emerges in the collaboration that becomes an elephant in the room. And having this, again, this sort of cultural appreciation for being openly talking about it and having and also really listening to understand. I think that really helps in this respect. Feedback really helps to address these elephants in the room, and it really helps you to avoid putting your head in the sand and putting all the dust under the carpet, but actually really addressing what is there. And the nice thing is, thanks to these feedback loops, if you have a conversation and you manage to address the elephant in the room, it actually creates also a much stronger bond between the people that have been involved, because they've been vulnerable, they've been going through stuff together that was difficult to deal with, and they appreciate and respect each other even more for having grown out of it together.
Mm-hmm. I think we talked about it in our recording 1 or 2, that the way a team or a group of people are working together and giving each other feedback, that it really helps to strengthen relationship. And good working relationship. I mean, you don't have to become all friends, but also among colleagues and team members, it's just important to have good collaborative relationships.
Yeah, it is, and it's also much more enjoyable. It's the management, because they are shapers, because they take a lot of decisions. They are really critical in contributing to create that culture of feedback. So do they value it? Are they open to it themselves? Do they walk the talk, or is it just like, yeah, feedback is a good thing, but it doesn't apply to me? Or are they really actively encouraging others to even give them feedback, for instance? Are they encouraging a learning culture that really has this sort of growth lens of, there is something there is maybe a challenge here, but actually by exploring it, we can go to something easier rather than avoiding risks, etc. So it's again that culture of tolerance, and the culture of risk taking, and the tolerance of failure. All of that, the management can either stimulate or stifle in a group, and that really, that can really also stifle or stimulate the culture.
Yeah, and I think the most important step is probably really the act of asking for feedback. The leader who asks for feedback, and really turning this upside down, because in our former experience, in our habits, it's the leader asking for giving feedback. No, ask for feedback yourself and do it again and again, and not just informal settings, wherever there is an occasion, wherever you feel it would be useful, ask for a feedback. And somehow you show your own vulnerability. You are ready to give and to receive at the same time. And it will become easier over time. But somewhere, someone has to start and kick it off, and else it will not happen. So if the leadership is not ready for it, it will be tough.
And maybe even there is a role for the leaders to play in bringing the human resources teams or departments on board with this, because of course they're usually the ones that are involved in setting up this ritual and annual appraisal systems, etc. And you can leave it at that, but actually I think they also play a part in understanding and stimulating a good collaborative culture among all the colleagues, and an enjoyable one. So why not also look at their role in that whole picture?
So what are the tips and tricks? What are the concrete steps? What can we, you, me, everybody together, what can we do? Start positive with appreciation. We saw there are different types of feedback. And I think even though it's sometimes awkward to give, to praise someone, I think it's a good thing to start with praise. What someone is doing well, give some flowers, and kick it off like that it becomes a habit, that you say what you like when someone is doing something that really went well, or that was really appreciated, or was a bold, important step. Appreciate it. Say it out loud.
Just make the other people seen and recognized somehow also in what they're doing well. I agree. And I think, I mean, in general, I mean, a very practical thing is, and it's what we've been saying all along. It's just do it. Just be the change that you want to see. If you believe in the power of feedback, then do it. Start it at your at your level in your interactions, and take it from there. And maybe that means that you become a positive deviant, someone that is not following the orthodoxy within your team, your group, whatever. But that could actually create a positive deviant experience that will be helpful and will inspire others to also follow this. And maybe the culture is going to be shaped by all of this in the process. So.
And I think to build it up, to get into a routine and into a habit, it's not always easy in the beginning. So I think we first need a little trigger. So I would say go fishing. At least once a week, go fishing for feedback. So now I'm curious on what people think about it. So, and curiosity is probably also a good driver, by the way. It's a positive driver, curiosity. Yeah, what are other people thinking about this and that, what I did or what I said or what we do together? It's not only about me, what we do together here. What do you think? Are we on track here? How are we doing? How are we together? Go fishing.
Yeah, I think you get some very, very interesting content and data and conversations and relationship building out of all of that. And I think at some point when it becomes a bit more embedded in your own individual practice, I mean, one way to sort of start building that collective culture is also to elevate the conversation, having that conversation that you just mentioned about feedback, but also taking one meta step to think, okay, what is happening when we're giving each other feedback like this? What is the result of that? What is positive about it? What is challenging, confronting about it? What can we do to reap the benefits of it more often or more deeply or whatever? Having a conversation about how feedback evolves, develops, happens, etc., so that progressively the whole group around you is part of cultivating that feedback, and then it really becomes part of the culture in the organization.
And I think when I might summarize what you just said, it's being in conversation together about how are we doing together. So it's like adding another layer of conversation within a team, group, organization. And it's an ongoing one, because when it's ongoing, then it's really rewarding. And I think it's important that it is rewarding. It's not about blaming and shaming. It's not about analyzing and someone telling what's not working. It's really being in conversation. And as long as it's rewarding, it will work. And rewarding in the sense of that we as a team, as a group, and me as an individual, we can grow and learn something.
The whole trick of developing a collective culture of feedback is also exactly like what you do for yourself individually. It's progressively, building your capacity to deal with that discomfort, and I think that is also part of what you can do in a group by for instance not seeking feedback only from your friends, because you know that they're likely to be quite soft on you, etc., but actually starting to really seek the feedback, the opinions of people that you know you're not actually getting along so well, or that you know might have a very critical view on you. And once you start doing that, again, you're walking the talk, and then you're making it happen, magic happen at a whole new level. Let's not forget that however useful and enjoyable or sometimes difficult, whatever it is not just a conversation for the sake of having a conversation. There's actionable stuff that emerges from the feedback conversations that informs your next actions, and it should be important. Otherwise, you also stay for the culture of your group at the level of having nice conversations, which is what happens, for instance, a lot in workshops. We have great conversations in a workshop, but how does that lead to real change? And that's sometimes a difficult thing. It's like whatever is emerging from that feedback, we just need to re-inject it. But so, summarizing a little bit. So starting small, seizing the opportunities, being mindful of the opportunities, having these conversations with each other, with a variety of people, valuing that diversity, valuing that inclusion of different voices, seeing this as an opportunity to grow, not just for yourself, but for everyone, progressively pushing your boundaries towards the less comfortable areas. And I think already you're on your way for a very good collective culture of feedback.
One more point, which I defend a lot. I think it's nice when feedback is mutual. when I give, but also receive, because yeah, it creates some balance, especially when you're in hierarchical situations, because yeah, a giver who is a receiver, you know how it feels like. Maybe it's not at the same moment, but I think the experience is really important. And I always say, give feedback with care and compassion. And you can do this with care and compassion. And when you also sometimes the receiver, and with the receiver, I would say it's about being open, listen. What does someone tell me, and what does it trigger in me? And this is the curiosity. Okay, and you don't have to react immediately. Take your time. It's up to you to react or not.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think ideally that's the way it should happen, that you're basically almost as peers, regardless of the function or whatever rank in a hierarchy, whatever, that you're really having this freedom to talk to each other and share feedback with each other the way it is. I do see that on a practical level, it doesn't always happen. And sometimes you are just giving feedback or you are just receiving feedback. And that's also okay, so long as it's appreciated, it's taken in for what it is, and it's taken in as only one way to get to it. I think, yeah, but as you rightly said, I think it's a good direction to aspire to have this being done from peer to peer, everyone getting involved in such conversations to evolve, to learn, to grow together. And yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think maybe it's not at the same moment, but if I get 10 feedbacks by Ewan within a month, and I never give him feedback, then I think it's really unbalanced. So maybe the double check is there somewhere.
Tell me if that happens, Nadia, okay?
that would be then a feedback on feedback. That's also a funny thing. Now we come really to the very, very practical tips and tricks on a level of how can you do this? What are good ways to nurture this culture of collective feedback in a group, team, network, whatever, formal or informal, doesn't matter. But what are pathways forward?
There's one that comes to my mind, and I've actually sort of practiced it, but very informally. And I actually I keep advising different groups and organizations I work with to do something like that. It's to start with a buddy, with a sort of feedback buddy, to have someone that you feel, not necessarily your direct colleague or whatever, but someone in your group that you feel you're not always working with, or I mean, you don't need to know each other's work intimately, but we're talking about professional circles here. But someone that you can really, you feel, okay, between you and me, we can at all times pick each other's brains for a moment of feedback. Or also maybe feel free. I mean, it's something that you need to discuss with each other, but I think that makes it much more, much easier. Exactly, like, you know, it's like when you practice a new sport or you develop a new habit, it's much easier to have buddies that are also doing it, because then there's like mutual motivation. When one is motivated, he or she can motivate the other person, etc., and vice versa. And I think that really, really helps.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then I think also important for a team or a group would be just to have once a conversation about feedback. Just talk about it. That's a nice subject, actually. What is our feedback culture? Do we have one? And so what it is, what are the characters? When do we give each other feedback? How do we feel? Reserve once an hour for having a conversation of feedback could really be also good and beneficial starting point.
I agree, because there's so much that is hidden behind that culture of feedback. As we said, listening, leadership, risk-taking, empathy, inclusion, diversity, all these things, they're bundled up into what feedback is touching.
Yeah, and getting away from putting feedback into the corner of the yearly appraisal system and bring it into your team and nurture it there. Yeah.
Which is, I mean, not to diminish, important also. I mean, it's fair that an organization needs to have an appraisal system, but leaving it at that means I don't know, it's like, you know, you arrive to a new land and you just settle for the first tree that you find, when there's like so much more to explore behind. It's like, one of our favorite repertoires, has got plenty of opportunities to explore feedback and develop, stimulate a culture of feedback. Liberating Structures. Do you want to tell me some ideas of how we could use liberating structures for?
Yeah, maybe when we are at this first conversation in a team about feedback, it could be actually quite nice to do a TRIS and to see if there are some really bad habits in your conversation where you actually prevent feedback or even sabotage feedback. So it could be even in a fun way if you do a TRIS to do some creative destruction about your culture so far. You probably have a reason to say we want to do it differently. So that could be a nice way to start it. Or another one could be on the same level of diving into the current feedback culture in the team to do future present. So catapult yourself into the future and have a chat from the future and then back to present. Where are we and what are our aspirations with our feedback culture?
Yeah. And then, I mean, aside from the future, if you look at the present practice, there's also plenty of options there. Two that I can mention, for instance, one is what, so what, now what, which is actually what we've been doing about unpacking this. We've been, what is this culture of feedback? So what does it mean? What are the implications for this? And now we're exploring now what can we do about it? And I think that could be a really helpful one. Another one is appreciative interviews, because that's really about understanding the stories of success. So how have people in your group or in your organization been using feedback, and what have been positive examples, and what are the conditions that made these examples successful? What did we learn from that, and what can we apply in other settings?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Another one, I mean, really a nice and lovely one is heard, seen, respected. This is really a good exercise to understand where you are with your feedback and what it does with you, and that you are heard and seen, respected in your perspective, in your experience.
I love that one. And I mean, another one is also more about how you can understand what are your preferences for receiving feedback, and how you can understand other people's preferences for receiving feedback is helping heuristics, where you explore 4 different ways of being in a listening conversation and having your partner listen to you in different ways. So again, I think it's got a lot of elements of feedback in there.
Mm-hmm. And then, I mean, you can also do it in a playful way. I mean, you probably have some more serious feedback conversation, but it can be a playful one. And then I would do positive gossip. This is just so nice. You can do it online or you can do it in the room. Doesn't really matter. Actually, with all the structures we mentioned, they are adaptable to both channel situations, face-to-face or online. But in positive gossip, I mean, the word positive is in there. You really give feedback to each other in a really nice way. It's a bit of a feel-good session. And I mean, from time to time we need this, and it's fun. A more serious one is improv, prototyping, action storming, where you can take situations that went in a way wrong or something didn't work out as you wanted and you don't really know how to do it differently. So you could take this situation and play with it, act on it, embody it, do it and do it again and again till you find a way out, till you discover. That would be a way to do it.
Yeah. And 2 more that are both lovely and at the same time pretty confronting. One is talking with pixies, where you're thinking about, okay, for instance, if you want to embrace a more regular feedback practice, what is keeping you from doing this? What is running in your mind that prevents you from actually doing this? Hearing different narratives of how you might change is helpful. And another one is tiny demons, where you're visualizing the fears that you have. So it could be the fears you have about feedback precisely. And by visualizing them, you actually disempower a little bit these fears already. And it also gives you some I don't know, it adds some playfulness, because it's no longer a diffuse thing, but something actually that looks really funny that you can even dance with.
Exactly. And I mean, last but not least, but almost last but not least, a really nice one is Troika Consulting. Troika, 3 people together, one sharing a challenge, asking for help, asking for feedback, and the other 2's having a conversation and going into listening mode. This is really a nice one. Another one would be the wise fish. I mean, similar also. And it's just nice because it puts you into small groups of 2 or 3 where you can do this.
Yeah. And maybe one last, because in fact, there's plenty of structures that could be used to support feedback. But I think I'm just going to mention this one as last for myself is 15% solutions, because it comes down to this idea that we always have enough agency, 15%. That allows us to do something without needing any other resources, no particular other abilities, no go ahead from anyone, no particular money or whatever, just something that we can do the next minute, tomorrow, next week. And so, yeah, what is it that we can do about this? So maybe this conversation is inviting you to reflect on your own 15% solutions about contributing to a good feedback practice that is taken off collectively. We've been referring to this book all along. Yeah, exactly. Thanks for the feedback. It's the Bible on this. There's many other books out there, but I think this one, particularly for receiving feedback, yeah, it's just dynamite. So have a read or listen.
So, and now what's the most important step? Do it. Start. Next occasion with your team, try it out. Do the bold step yourself, ask for a meeting, talk about it, choose one of the structures we have just talked about, and have fun.
Exactly. Enjoy. It's a brave world out there.
And make it rewarding for yourself and for everyone with you.
Thank you, Nadia. It's been a super, super nice series, super nice conversation.
Thanks, Ewen.